find somebody else. Thank you.
Busy. Hey, Coco?
I'm so proud of that.
Crazy stuff going on.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Public Property and Parks Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Counsel Staben?
Present.
Present Counsel LaPierre.
Present.
Present Counsel Calucci. Present Counsel Chakutis.
Perfect time.
Present.
Present Counsel Field.
Present. I want to try to throw my voice like he did.
Perfect timing. Good evening.
And sitting with us tonight is Council Alex. Two items on the agenda. First, a request from the Assistant Director of Curriculum to request the use of the foyer and hall space for Lynn Public Schools Civics Day on May 31st from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. What's the wish of the
Motion to
committee?
approve.
Second made, seconded. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel LaPierre.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Calucci.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis. Yes, Counsel Field.
Yes.
Okay, second is under other business, discussion regarding 424 Essex Street, the 911 dispatch center expired lease. Attorney Lamanna.
As you know, the city of Lynn for many decades have been using the 911 tower on Essex Street. It also houses the fire alarm call takers. The city, at the last council meeting, took two pieces of property as we figure out the future needs of the call takers. We're looking to authorize the mayor to enter into a license agreement to continue to house the fire alarm operators until such time as the decision is made with their long-term permanent home, and to continue also to house the antenna support structures for our telecommunications and emergency needs. My understanding is the ultimate goal is to relocate both the call takers and the antenna facilities away from the Essex Street property within the next year or so.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Lamanna. What we're looking for is a motion to authorize the mayor to execute the license agreement with RWS Realty Trust in a form drafted and approved by the Law Department for the Fire Alarm Dispatch Center and Tower antenna site at 424 rear Essex Street.
I'll make a motion in favor.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any discussion?
Yep. Attorney Lamanna.
Councilor Field?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney Lamanna, is that a month-to-month, or is that an extended, what's the lease period?
My understanding, it's 1 year for the antennas and for the fire alarm operators till December 31st, and then it would be month to month. So it's
December
one year to 2023, a year from now for the antenna support structure, and for the call takers through the end of this calendar year. And if the building hasn't been retrofitted, and I think that what's been discussed is the State Street property is a potential new home. If it hasn't been retrofitted and ready, that the license agreement will call for a month to month. I do want to reiterate that there is some back monies owed going back to July 1st of last year. So this will become current, authorize the comptroller to become current on our obligations, because we have been using space of a private party, and this will allow us to continue to use it until such time as our needs are met in alternative locations, and perhaps locations that are on city-owned property that will incur no expenses to the city.
Okay, and is this fiscal 22 or 23?
It would be fiscal 22, and it would include fiscal 23, which is just around the corner on July 1st. So it would overlap into the current fiscal year into the next fiscal year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel LaPierre?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Calucci?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Field.
Yes.
Okay, is there any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made, seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
You can take it.
Coco, how many suits do you got now? 10?
Licensing for April 26th. Roll call, please.
Counsel Field,
Present.
present Counsel Hogan,
Present.
present Counsel Lozey, absent Counsel Net,
Present.
present Counsel Alanson,
Present.
present.
Nice tie.
Okay, we have all renewals this week.
Take them as a whole if we can. What's the motion, wish of the committee?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion
Second.
approved by Councilor Hogan. We have a second by Councilor Ellen Sung. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those carry. Do we have any new business or old
We
business?
have a
sorry,
Wyoming
we have
Little
another
League
Canning.
Canning,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
adults only, May 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2020.
Councilor Hogan, a second by Councilor Ellen Sung. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. That canning is granted. Do we have any new business, Madam Clerk?
We have other business. We have a request for canning for Clinton Classical High Boys Basketball Program, for canning on October 21st and 22nd.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Councilor Ellen Sung.
Second.
Second by Councilor Hogan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Those canning dates are granted to Lynn Classical. Any other business?
No new business.
No other business? What's the wish of our committee?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to
Second.
adjourn by Councilor Net.
Second.
We have a second by Councilor Ellen Sung. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
That was quick.
Present. Counselor LaPierre. Absent. Counselor Chakutis.
Present.
Present. Counselor Alansug.
Present.
Present.
First thing on the agenda.
We have one item. It's constable appointment for Kenneth Grady, 271 Walnut Street in Lynn. Mr. Grady?
Did all the councils have a chance to look at this?
Yes, we did.
Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion approved, second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Field?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel LaPierre absent. Counsel Chakutis?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Alansug?
Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. You can go pick it up at the clerk's office Thursday, right? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Because everything's so basic. This is where you speak, this is where you remember. They're coming in for public hearings, you can always swivel. I don't know. That's the hardest vote. I just missed you. I thought you were in the bathroom.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee meeting. Madam Clerk, could you please roll call?
Yep. Counsel Net?
Present.
Present Counsel Staben?
Present.
Present Counsel Barton?
Present.
Present Counsel Chakutis? Present Counsel Walsh?
Present.
Could you please read the transfer?
We have $1,200,000 from free cash to the account of the State Street revenue to fully fund the land taking of the State Street property.
What's the wish committee?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis? Yes, Counsel Walsh?
Yes.
Next, please.
$700,000 from free cash to the Friend Street revenue to fully fund the land taking of the Friend Street property.
Motion approved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis? Yes, Counsel Walsh?
Yes.
Next, please.
$49,000 from free cash to the DPW expense to fund the proposal of updating Lynn's pavement management system.
Motion approved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis? Yes, Counsel Walsh?
Next one, please.
$353.50 from the police expense to the police prior year bills to fund an invoice received after the cleanup warrant was done.
Motion approved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis? Yes, Counsel Walsh?
Yes.
Is it near emergency? Oh, all emergency, okay. Roll call on all emergency, please.
Motion for emergency on all of them.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis? Yes, Counsel Walsh?
Yes.
Any new business?
No new business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
ladies are not, no, but I don't know. I tried to move it, but. Supposed to put that slide so it's full. Everyone will know that.
You don't know, a new one's loose.
He's been smiling the whole time.
Roll call.
Counselor Allensuk.
Present.
President Counsel Barton.
Present.
President Counsel Chakutis.
Present.
President Counsel Calucci. President Counsel Field.
Present.
President Counsel Hogan.
Present.
President Counsel LaPierre.
Present.
President Counsel Lozey.
Present.
President Counsel Net.
Present.
President Counsel Staben.
Present.
President Counsel Walsh.
We get a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Communications,
We have no new communications.
public hearings,
We have no public hearings.
public hearings to be set down.
We have a petition of Bayron Argueta, owner of Salinas Market, for permission to have a fruit stand tent and seating with 2 tables and 4 chairs for ice cream service at 361 Boston Street.
The wish of
Motion to
the
set it
council.
down.
Motion to set it down, second. All in favor? Opposed? Set it down. Committees, Public Property and Parks, Councilor Staben.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 items on the agenda. One was request from the Assistant Director of Curriculum Department to request the use of the foyer and hall space for Lynn Public Schools Civics Day on May 31st from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Unanimous vote of the committee. Motion to approve.
Motion, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Second, Mr. President, was discussion regarding the 424 Essex Street 911 dispatch center and antenna expired lease. Motion was made to authorize His Honor the Mayor to execute license agreements with RWS Realty Trust in a form drafted and approved by the Law Department for the Fire Alarm Dispatch Center and Tower Antenna Site at 424 Essex Street. Unanimous vote of the, unanimous approval of the committee. Motion to approve.
Do you have a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Is that it?
That's all, Mr. President.
Okay, all right.
agenda
Licensing,
tonight.
Councilor Field.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a unanimous vote by the committee. I make a motion to approve our licensing.
Motion approved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Public Safety and Public Health, Councilor Barton.
Unanimous vote of committee, motion to approve.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ways and Means, Councilor Net.
Yes, Mr. President, all transfer voted unanimously by the committee. I make a motion to approve. Thank you.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
A second. Do a roll call. Roll call.
Can you read the orders?
Read the orders. Yep. Thank you.
We have the following transfers: $1,200,000 from free cash to the account of State Street revenue to fully fund land taking of the State Street property. $700,000 from free cash to the Friend Street revenue to fully fund land taking of the Friend Street property. $49,000 from free cash to DPW expense to fund the proposal of updating Lynn's pavement management system. $353 from the police expense to the police prior year bills to fund an invoice received after the cleanup warrant was done. And that's it.
That's it. So we have a motion to approve. We have a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Counsel Alan
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Calucci.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Field.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Hogan.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel LaPierre.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Lozey.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Net.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Walsh.
Yes.
And we had an emergency.
We have an emergency on that, Counselor?
Here you all emergency voted by the committee. I make a motion to approve.
Motion approved. Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Counsel Alan
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Barton.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Chakutis.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Calucci.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Field.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Hogan.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel LaPierre.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Lozey.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Net.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Staben.
Yes.
Yes, Counsel Walsh.
Yes. Motion carries. Do we have any old business? Any new business?
We have new business. First order of business is a discussion regarding the ordinance for motor scooters and motorized bikes.
Attorney Lamanna, come to the podium. Give us a little briefing on this, please.
We're looking to set this down for a public hearing, scooter ordinance, and it applies to mopeds, recreational vehicles, increasing the fine to $300, making it illegal to do stunts, wheelies, and the such. Be working with the police department. They have some ideas about some possible amendments for the May 10th meeting. I know Chief Reddy is here as well, but it strengthens the ordinance considerably.
I just have a question real quick. So is this something that we'd be looking to vote on tonight or to set down?
Set down for a public hearing for the May 10th hearing meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Motion to set
question?
it down.
Second.
Any questions or comments from anybody? Counselor Field?
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Lamanna, is it 300 the maximum we can do, or can it be higher?
Per state law, the maximum a city council can impose on any fine is $300. To go higher would require a home rule petition. There may be some thought that the council may want to go the home rule petition avenue. I know it's frustrating the police department, it's frustrating, I think, to all you councilors, that many of the state law violations carry a minimal fine, $30 for failure to wear a helmet and the like. So it is it's frustrating. It's almost to the point where it's not worth the ticket and the collection activity that's needed in order to do that. But here, a wheelie, and as you see, these people not obeying the law, not obeying the rules of the roadway, there's some significant teeth to this. And it'll allow tow companies to seize the vehicles. The scooters, the mopeds won't be returned until the fine is paid. It's going to require, I think one of the amendments that Chief Reddy and I discussed today is for the May 10th meeting, and again, urge the public to appear and speak their positions. But one possible friendly amendment would be a fine to the owner of the moped or the scooter. In many cases, it's the person that is caught doing the illegal activities, whatever it is using someone else's recreational vehicle. So there would be a fine that could go not only to the operator, which is typical, what you see in most motor vehicle violations, but it would also attach to the owner. And speaking with the chief today, there is some difficulty. Some of these, unlike a car that has a title, and we can know Jim Lamanna owns a Jeep Patriot, some of these vehicles are purchased from friends and the like, and it is very difficult for an owner. And speaking with the chief, when we do seize vehicles from an operator, someone will show up and say, this is my vehicle, and the tow company will release it upon a payment of fine. We want to have some proof of the person that's showing up claiming it's theirs. It is in fact theirs, and without sufficient proof that the police department wouldn't release those.
Thank you.
Counsel Lozey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Lamanna, could you provide us at the when we set it down for the hearing, or is it going,
I think we'd set that down tonight.
tonight, so it'll be the hearing?
Yep.
Could you provide us with the information on what other communities have a home rule petition? It's a lot easier to not have to reinvent the wheel, I'm sure, but I think I agree with what your supposition that we probably should even stiffen this up further. And this is a good first start and towards solving this problem. But please, if you could, let us know if there are other communities that have this home rule petition, and if not,
We'll certainly look into it, and I'd be remiss if I did not give credit to Deputy O'Toole, who did a lot of research in other communities. I am not aware of any, but we'll certainly look into other cities and towns. It was a tragedy, I think, as you know, in Boston a few weeks ago with a moped or whatnot in an accident. So more and more cities are looking at this. I know the Lynn Police, and I don't want to speak for Chief Reddy, but been working hand in hand with the Boston Police on tips and on how to investigate and how to pull these violators over safely, which is always a concern if they're choosing to drive through playgrounds, and the ability to pursue these operators safely is a challenge, to say the least.
yeah, it's a shame that mopeds have been around for so long, and they were always a helpful tool for people to putter around, and now it's just being abused terribly. It's out of control. Thank you, Attorney.
Councilor Barton.
Yeah, we have the police chief here. I'd like to hear if he had something to add to this.
Chief Reddy, come on up to the podium.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Mr. President. As we've discussed before, the challenge of motor scooters, motorbikes, ATVs, motorized skateboards, and all of those motorized conveyances is really difficult. I think every urban community, certainly in Massachusetts, is experiencing similar problems. We've established a relationship with the unit in Boston that is enforcing the problem there. They have a different sort of problem. A lot of it is similar to us, but they tend to get much larger groups that go on big, long rides. But many other communities like Salem and Lynn and those of our size have more localized groups that travel mainly within the city or to contiguous communities. So we're trying to establish partnerships with our area law enforcement agencies to share intelligence and share best practices, to your point, Council Lozzi. And we're trying to use that information to inform our recommendations to the law department. I have added 2 additional plainclothes officers to the gang unit. The gang unit has primary responsibility for coordinating our response to this issue. In terms of the question of whether the gang members make up the bike culture, there is certainly gang representation within the bike culture, but the bike culture is much larger than the gang problem itself. In conversations with Mayor Nicholson recently, we discussed various approaches, and one of the things we're going to do is we're working with our partners who work with at-risk youth to try to do some outreach to some of the individuals that they work with, to try to bring them in and have a discussion and seek their cooperation and explain the impact, the adverse impact they're having on the community. So we are going to try to do that type of outreach and engagement, but we're also saying that we believe the best path forward is to have really strong fines that are going to hit people in the pocketbook heavily when they engage in this kind of reckless, dangerous driving behavior. So that's why we endorse the move to increase the fines and to have the ability to seize and hold these vehicles until fines are paid. And that will certainly send a strong message that if you drive this way, we are going to make you accountable. As you know, we have challenges with enforcement in that pursuing vehicles like this creates a whole range of dangers, so we have to be very careful about when we choose to do that. So therefore, we try and engage in other tactics to try to be able to grab these individuals and identify them and charge them appropriately without having to resort to pursuits. And without getting to the tactics involved, that's what the gang unit will be coordinating on our part. The patrol divisions have an equal part. They will generally initiate a stop, but if the motorists, the bike riders take off, they will quickly disengage because of the dangers, but they will support the gang unit in many other areas, so we'll have a multi-pronged approach to addressing this issue. I have had communication with area police chiefs. Chief Miller had put together a letter to, he wanted, propose, and we discussed with other areas police chiefs, signed by many of us, to basically put out on social media and asking for parents to step up their role and their awareness of how their children who are involved in this type of driving behavior are impacting the community. But to be honest, the motorbike, motor scooter, motor conveyance problem is primarily an adult problem. It's individuals 18, 19 into their 20s and above. So although we think it's appropriate to try to get parents to send that message, clearly these are individuals who have to be held personally accountable, and that's our position with regard to that. Part of our response will include putting up social media messages to seeking input and tips from members of the community. Specifically, we'd like to know where these motor scooters and motor vehicles are gathering, where they're being stored, where they're staying. We'll then use that information and once we verify it, we'll work with ISD to take appropriate action for properties where there is more than the required one unregistered vehicle on the property. It's another way to address the issue, to remove these vehicles from the community without engaging in dangerous enforcement practices wherever we can. So just to the overview, we are adding more resources to address the problem that'll be led by the gang unit. We are going to do a media outreach to the community. We're also going to do a direct outreach to individuals who might be involved with this culture and seek their cooperation. And then we're going to seek the appropriate enforcement measures through fines to try to hold people accountable and send a costly message that if you do this, we're going to try and make you pay for it. Any questions?
Councilor Staben.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Lamanna and Chief Reddy, I appreciate the time you've both put into this. The Chief and I have spent quite a bit of time discussing this back and forth. In regards to the older population that are riding them, I would imagine that many of them also have driver's licenses. Would this getting bagged on one of these things impact their license if they have one?
If we charge them with the RMV citation that is listed here, I think it's like any other violation. Once you get a certain number of violations, then the registry may take action. To be honest, Counselor, I think that would take a long time to have an impact, and it would take multiple events before that they would take action on their license. So I don't see that as a quick option.
But one citation on one of these will impact their auto insurance if they have a car registered.
I would assume because it's a moving infraction, even though it's charged differently, and Attorney Lamanna mentioned the fines. They're fined differently. Like a speeding on this is not the same as a speeding in a car. It's a much lower penalty. I assume that's a moving infraction by the registry, but I honestly don't know that. I'd have to research that.
Well, I know that if a vehicle is pulled over for something as, even like an expired inspection sticker, they still get hit with a moving violation surcharge on their auto insurance, which can cost upwards of $2,000.
Right, but these are not defined as motor vehicles. They have a different definition. So that's why I don't know if those same rules apply to these vehicles. But I'm certainly willing to look into that and get back to you on that.
I think that's one of the, particularly those that are older, that are cruising around on these things that have motor vehicles insured in their names. That's really where you'd whack them in the pocketbook by hitting them with surcharges that are going to drag out for 5 years.
The reason we wanted to charge them under a city ordinance is because we can hit a much heftier fine. I think we could try to find out whether we can charge both an RMV citation, especially if it does impact their insurance and their license status. But I don't know off the top of my head. I can look into that. And like I said, we'll certainly report back to you on that.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
We do want to hit them mostly in the pocketbook as an effective means for addressing this.
They're terrorists.
Yeah.
I've had residents actually move
Yeah.
out of the neighborhoods and out of the city because of it.
It's challenging because even like ATVs and off-road vehicles aren't even registered through the registry of motor vehicles. It's a whole different state department where those get registered. They're not allowed to be on the street at all. So I don't think we can issue a moving citation for those vehicles. But mopeds and various motorized conveyances are registered by the registry, but they don't have the same titling requirements. It's really a hodgepodge, and I think many law enforcement professionals are frustrated by how challenging all these different rules are for these types of vehicles. It's certainly a big problem.
I don't know the details of it, but I did see something on the news yesterday about Fall River with a program with seizing them. They actually showed them being bulldozed over, and they're seizing them and destroying them.
Right. Well, the proposed ordinance gives us the authority to seize them, but I believe there has to be subsequent offenses before we can have them destroyed. Is that correct? Councilor, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Councilor Hogan.
Yes, I just want to say, I want to thank the Lynn Police because since this has started, the gang unit, Sergeant Gorman's here. He's been great. Constituents reached out to me. If people do know where they're storing these vehicles, it is great to reach out, and they will take action. And like we said, it is a public safety issue when they're driving them to pull them over. But if we find out where they're being stored, it's huge. And I had constituents reach out that were petrified being surrounded by these things. And I just want to say to the Lynn Police Chief and the gang unit, keep doing a great job. Thank you.
Council Lapierre.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo my colleagues' sentiments and want to thank Chief Reddy as well as Attorney Lamanna. As you imagine, we get calls from a lot of constituents, from all corners of the city, really. It's throughout the city, and I know the ward councilors get them and get inundated with them. I know your position in the past always, some people will want to confront these folks. We recommend you do not, as a regular citizen, go up to the bikers or try to, it's best to call the police. What's the public service, and what should they do? I know they call us, we follow up with you guys, but what's the best advice to give a resident who's...
I strongly recommend they don't confront them.
Yes.
I will tell you that when our experience, and this is experienced throughout the region, that when individuals are part of this group, they take on a social identity of the group, and it is not that person. They become a mob mentality, and they become very aggressive, even to our officers. We've had plainclothes officers who've been off with one bike and had groups of them come and circle them around, be very aggressive, even kick the mirrors on their cars and things like that. So I would strongly encourage citizens not to directly engage with them. Take a photo of them if you can do it discreetly. Don't do it in the open. But just take a look at the description and call us. Give us a description of the location, what they're wearing, what the bike looked like, and which direction they headed in. If you live near a property where they're coming and going, you can report this information to us anonymously. We will go out and try to verify it, but we will take every one of those tips, every bit of that information, and do our best to verify it and then take the appropriate action.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions?
Question, Mr. President.
Councilor Alonso.
Attorney Lamanna, please.
Tag.
So we received two documents, right? One is in 2004, and the other one is just sent today. Well, thank you that we're actively updating this after 18 years. But I agree with Councilor Field that if we find them $100 in 2004 and increase them to $250, we are not aggressive enough. They've been very aggressive in our city, and we need to show them that we are aggressive as well. Is there a way for us to increase that even higher, or is there a cap for the city? That's number one. Number two is that in section 11 of the new document you showed us, the destruction of motorized for repeat offenses and subsequent violations. What is the magic number here? How do you identify if it's a repeat offender? The second time that individual is caught? Is that what's the magic number?
In the ordinance, a subsequent offense would be, the second would warrant the Lynn Police Department to petition the court and seek the destruction of the vehicle. There would need to be a court order before any government, whether it's law enforcement or any municipal official, destroys private property. So the second offense can certainly be warranted. I believe there's language in here about egregious behavior as well. So if it's not simply riding without a helmet, or this is a situation where there's public safety issues surrounding a citizen, cutting in and out of traffic to make it dangerous for other motor vehicle operators to travel, that egregious behavior can warrant it. As I indicated before, the maximum number is 300, so at the public hearing, it's certainly appropriate to go right up to the max. And traditionally, there is some type of sliding scale. We recognize it's very difficult to catch these violators, so it may warrant go right to the 300. The 250, 300 was mirrored after an ordinance in Boston that went right to 250, which is typically high. Your first offense you see in most ordinances is 50 and 100. Typically, you don't see a $300 violation until the third or sub-third or subsequent offense, but that's something that at the public hearing, the council may want to go right up to the 300. If there is a desire to go above that limit, the home rule petition would need to be filed with the legislature, and at that time, it may be an opportunity to address the other significantly low fines that are on the books from a state law level, and I know in the past we've been frustrated with fireworks and the like, but I think there's a $25 fine for possession of fireworks. So again, that the fine is not going to discourage anybody from going to New Hampshire and coming back to Lynn and setting off fireworks. A $30 fine for many of these violations is not going to be, is certainly not going to discourage anybody from engaging in illegal activities and illegal, unlawful, improper behavior. Hopefully, the $300 will hit them in the wallet, but the home rule petition may be the way to go. I know some of the councilors have reached out to the state delegation and encouraged a deeper dive into this.
I hope so. Thank you, Attorney.
Yep.
Councilor Field.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Lamanna, just on a follow-up to Councilor Starbird's comments and Chief Reddy's response. This body took a vote at our last discussion of these motorbikes and approved for the law department to send a letter to the state requiring these types of, asking them to get into legislation to require that these types of machines be registered, so that a fine that they would receive on this would almost carry over into their deductibles with other insurances that are on other vehicles that they may own, car registrations, truck registrations, whatever. Has there been any response from the state as far as that request from our council?
I'll follow up. I don't believe so. And just give a little bit way of background. In 2004, my recollection was that the state was not taking any action for scooters. So the city council back in 2004 enacted an ordinance that outlawed scooters entirely within the city of Lynn. Within a month or two of that vote, the legislature did take some action and allowed scooters to be driven by people that have a license during sunrise to sunset. So even that 2004 ordinance became unlawful shortly thereafter once the legislature had finally addressed the issue back there. But I think everyone agrees, and my conversations with the councilors and the police chiefs, not just Chief Reddy, but a long line of police chiefs, that much more should have been done in 2004 and since 2004 on a statewide basis to address it, because what's on the books at the state level is having minimal, if any, effect in discouraging the use of these.
Thank you.
But I certainly will follow up. As you know, the legislature, it's not just our delegation.
Yeah, I'd certainly encourage the state to again take a look at this with, this could be a point of sale with registration with, the companies that are selling these motorized vehicles at the point of sale. If they're required to, require registration of these vehicles, it can stop right there. And it kind of adds to that identification that Chief Reddy mentioned with not just a photo, but if these motorized vehicles require registration, they have to have a displayed license plate like an automobile or truck would, commercial vehicle, whatever. So again, I would encourage the state to consider this. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion to set it down in a second. Roll call.
Counsel Alan
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Barton?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Chakutis?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Calucci?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Field?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Hogan?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel LaPierre?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Lozey?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Net?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Starbird?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Walsh?
Yes. Set it down. All right. Any other new business?
Next discussion is an overview and update from the city planner Aaron Clausen and Attorney Lamanna regarding the MBTA Communities Draft Regulations created in connection with the recently established Section 3A of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A.
Thank you, Council President. Aaron Clausen, the Lynn Principal Planner. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to walk through this presentation. If I may,
You can come on up
to the
here and set
desk
up
so I
there.
can walk through that PowerPoint they put together.
Great. Finally.
We're hoping to get out of the 70s one of these days and have real TV, so.
There we go. I think we have it up there. So again, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about these new zoning regulations that will affect many communities in the Boston metro region, including the city of Lynn. Just a quick note that I've had an opportunity to meet with Attorney Lamanna and Mike Donovan, the ISD director, to get understand the meaning of the legislation, the new section within Mass General Law 40A, and its impact on the city. So I just want to kind of give you a quick overview of this new regulation and sort of the next steps and what the city needs to do to prepare for its requirements. So first of all, just want to hit really briefly sort of the housing context, which drove, I think, the legislature to move forward with legislation to create a new section within Mass General Law. Give you the legislative background, an overview of the guidelines that have been set up, the draft guidelines that have been set up for communities to participate in the process and achieve compliance under this new zoning regulation, and then quickly kind of ground that in the Lynn context. What does it mean for the city? How do we need to adapt our zoning regulations, if at all, to meet these new requirements? And then how we can work with the council to move forward with that. So just, again, some regional context. And I should note that this information is drawn from work that the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development has done on the matter, and I think frames for us in the region why this regulation is put into place. So, between 1960 and 1990, the state created over 900,000 housing units. That same 30-year period from 1990 till now, it only created 470,000. So just over half of that housing production has taken place in the last 30 years, and which has really led to a housing crisis. The governor's office commissioned a study called the Future of Work study recently, primarily to kind of identify what's the path forward in the context of COVID. How is it going to affect the workplace for the Commonwealth? And one of the key issues that they came down is that there's just not enough housing. Housing itself is a major barrier to economic development and access to jobs. So the legislation isn't just a matter of ensuring that there's adequate housing for the region. It's about an economic development competitiveness within the region. This graph on the bottom just kind of shows you over time how the number of housing units have decreased in the Commonwealth. And you can see, it's sort of hard to see here, but basically, again, post-1990, you can see that there's a precipitous decrease in the number of housing that's created. So we've got sort of a supply issue. Oops, let's jump back. So again, this is taken from DHCD's and the EOHED's presentation on the matter, but essentially what they've determined and why they felt they needed to act was that there's a core challenge in the Commonwealth right now in creating adequate housing to support families, workers, and aging households. The Commonwealth, the state of Massachusetts, is seeing some of the highest increases in the cost of housing, both in ownership and rental in the country. And what we're finding is that, not surprisingly, because of that, it's increased the financial pressure on working families within the state. And lastly, as I mentioned, beyond just housing and access to housing, it's an economic development competitiveness inhibitor. We are less competitive with other states across the country because our housing costs are so high. So that's the background. That's sort of the regional context. In Lynn, I think everybody here knows pretty well, based on the housing production plan, a lot of the data that was produced out of that, we're seeing similar issues here in the city of Lynn. So Lynn has now, based on the 2020 census, 36,782 housing units. But like the Commonwealth, most of that production happened pre-1990. So just over 2,000 units have been created since 1990. That's 6% of our total units over that time. And I just should note on this too that the last 3 or 4 years, almost half of those units were created in the last 3 years alone. So without the latest increase in housing production in the city, it would be much worse. It would be a much worse picture. But the main point here is that the city of Lynn is dealing with the same kind of housing issues and housing supply issues that the Commonwealth has seen. Similar to the Commonwealth, median rents have risen 25% between 2015 and 2018. Median housing costs have nearly doubled between 2011 and 2019. And then, as we know from the housing production plan, more than 42% of the households in the city are housing cost burden. So again, a lot of these supply and demand issues and their impacts on cost affect our residents as well. So in 2021, the legislature passed an economic development bill that was wide-ranging, included two elements that affect zoning and how communities can apply zoning regulations. The first, which we won't get into too much today, but reduces the threshold for approval of zoning amendments from a supermajority to just a majority for zoning amendments that increase the ability to construct multifamily housing or transit-oriented development or increase density. It also reduces the threshold for special permit granting authorities to approve special permits for the same purposes. So no longer do you need 2/3 to approve those kinds of changes. It's just a majority vote. The second piece, which is really the topic of tonight, is the creation of the MBTA communities regulations. It's created a new section within Mass General Law 40A, Section 3A. As you probably know, that Mass General Law 48 is the zoning act. It is essentially the framework that the state has created for municipalities to create zoning regulations. It is absolutely a fact that each municipality has the power to create zoning to carry out the broader vision that's created in a master plan or a comprehensive plan. But there are rules that are created at the state level, although limited in Massachusetts, there are rules by which communities need to follow. And so this legislation in 2021 created a new Section 3A called the MBTA communities. And essentially at a high level, what that requirement created was that every MBTA community, which is shown on this map here, there's I think 175 communities in the region that have been identified as MBTA communities, need to create a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right, and the district needs to be of quote unquote reasonable size. That means that relates both to the district's geographic area, but also the unit capacity that can be built out within that district. And then it also sets a minimum density requirement of 15 dwelling units per acre. And then the second and third piece of that is that the Department of Housing Community Development was directed to create guidelines for compliance, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then it also set out essentially what is the impact on a community for not becoming compliant or not being compliant with these regulations, which is communities who are not lose access to significant grant funding through the state, including the MassWorks program, which the city of Lynn has been very successful in the last 5 years in going after and receiving funds to implement infrastructure improvements within the community. The Housing Choice Grant Program, which the city just recently became eligible for receiving funds up to $250,000 a year. And then the third impact is loss of access to gaming commission funding, which also the city has been successful in the past in going after and receiving funds through those three programs. So there's a lot of benefit to a community, whether it's Lynn or not, to be compliant with these guidelines. So DHCD has promulgated a draft set of compliance guidelines, and they did it in January of 2021, and it added a little bit more clarity to how a community can demonstrate compliance with these requirements. So the first piece is that the reasonableness piece of the size of the multifamily zoning district is at a minimum 50 acres. And then there also has to be a unit capacity, so that zoning district must allow a certain amount of housing units based on the total housing units within that community, and also based on the designation of that MBTA community. And I'll get into that a little bit more and how that's calculated. And as I mentioned earlier, the legislation itself stated that the zoning district must create a density standard of at least 15 units per acre. And then it also has to be suitable for housing for families and children, meaning essentially there cannot be a limit on the number of bedrooms that is allowed in that multifamily district. And it also cannot restrict the by right element of the zoning use can't be age restricted, so it can't be just for senior housing. It needs to be open and available to all kinds of household types. And then lastly, the zoning district needs to be within a half mile of a transit station, whether it's bus, commuter rail, rapid transit, or a ferry. So getting a little bit more into the minimum unit capacity compliance piece of this. In the guidelines, DHCD has created essentially 4 different MBTA community types based on the types of transit service that is available within that community. There's first the rapid transit community, as you hopefully can see in this map, is the darker blue. These are the communities that are served by the subway, whether blue line, red line, green line. Those are the rapid transit communities. The next level is the bus community, which is what the city of Lynn has been identified as. We're pretty well served by the bus service. And then commuter rail, and then a community that is not necessarily directly served by the MBTA, but is adjacent to a community that has MBTA services, also considered an MBTA community. That's the lighter green in this map. What does that mean? So each different category of community has to show that there's a high that they're meeting that unit capacity based on their designation. So for us, we have to show that zoning district, that multifamily zoning district, can carry a capacity of 20% of the total housing units within the city. So as I said, we're just over 36,000 housing units in the city right now. We have to be able to carry 20% of that within our multifamily district. So that's quick math, 7,200 units. So a minimum 50 acres. And we also need to show and demonstrate to DHCD that zoning district can accommodate over 7,000 housing units. So the compliance process, as I mentioned, in January of 2022, the draft guidelines were promulgated, and essentially what we just walked through is the contours of them. By May 2nd, we need to have this presentation to the council. So this is one step in meeting our compliance requirements. We'll need to submit, along with minutes from this meeting, to DHCD, essentially an overview, a summary form about the city. Essentially, what is our zoning framework now? What are the zoning districts we have in place now? Population, housing units, etc. General information about the city. We submit that by May 2nd. We are compliant on a temporary basis through the end of this year. By December, by the end of 2022, we'll need to submit a request for determination of compliance to DHCD. And in that request, we need to demonstrate how we're meeting all those criteria that we just walked through. We'll have to show the zoning district that's in place that allows for multifamily by right. We'll have to demonstrate that it's over 50 acres. We'll have to demonstrate that we can carry a capacity of housing units over 7,200 units, and that it's not age restricted, that the zoning rules don't limit family housing types. And then shortly thereafter, in 2023, we will know whether or not the DHCD approves that or not, or has additional questions or information for us to achieve compliance. So the good news for us is that we still have time to demonstrate compliance to the state, and we'll be eligible for grant programs coming up, including MassWorks and the Housing Choice. And I believe, and I can just talk through this briefly now, I believe that the city of Lynn is actually uniquely prepared for this. As you may have read in the Globe recently, there are a lot of communities that have a lot of concerns about these requirements. The city of Lynn is not one of them, in my view. So what you're looking at here is a map of the city that identifies all the transit locations, including bus and commuter rail, and has a quarter mile buffer around each of those stops. That's not even the half mile distance that's required under the legislation or the requirements. And you can essentially see that the entire city could be, any zoning district within the city would be compliant of the distance requirement. So we have a lot of latitude from that perspective. And then this is the zoning map, as you might all recognize. And without making you try to kind of tease out what you're looking at here, there are at least 5 zoning districts in a preliminary review of our zoning code that are essentially compliant with those requirements that we talked through. So the central business zoning, the central business district, all of the waterfront zones, apartment zoning districts, classes 1 and 2, high-rise building zoning district, in my view, are all compliant because they allow by right multifamily housing that is denser than 15 dwelling units per acre. And just sort of maybe difficult to see in this map, but the red in the center of town, the sort of blue colors are all the waterfront districts, the dark browns are the high-rise districts. You can see there's a considerable amount of the city already zoned, allowing multifamily by right. For instance, the central business district is about 150 acres. It's 3 times the size of the minimum requirement that the state is going to require. The waterfront districts, again, which I believe all comply with the requirements, is over 400 acres. We're in a good position to meet our requirements. And I think in some ways, the city's zoning code can serve as a model for other communities and what they might need to be doing going forward. So the next steps, I've already mentioned that we need to submit our community form along with minutes from this meeting to DHCD by the 2nd of next month. Over the summer, there is work to do on our part, although at a high level, it's pretty clear to me that we will comply with these requirements in their draft form as they are drafted now. But we need to sort of come up with a methodology to quantify and document that for DHCD's benefit. And part of the reason there's some work to do there is that our zoning doesn't regulate density on a lot area per dwelling unit like the requirement sets. We basically regulate building bulk and size and scale in terms of height and setbacks. So we're going to have to calculate how that affects the lot area per dwelling unit, the density that is allowed in the CBD. I think we'll be able to meet the 15 unit per dwelling unit requirement quite easily. Recent projects in the downtown are much closer to 50 units per dwelling units per acre. So we'll be fine there. But the point here being, we've got some work to do to sort of document and articulate how we're meeting the requirements so that we can submit them to DHCD by the end of calendar year. The only caveat I will make to that is I believe we will need to make one amendment to our zoning code to comply with these requirements. In the CBD, there is a limitation on the number of bedrooms that can be built in a multifamily project. Right now, no more than 10% of the units can have more than 2 bedrooms. That is a limitation that these requirements won't allow. So we may have to come back to the city council in the relative near future to move forward amendments in that front. But otherwise, I think we're in good shape. And that's really all I have. Any questions?
Council Lozey?
Oh, did you?
Oh, I thought, yeah, Council Lozey?
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. It's good to hear that Lynn is basically compliant with the community compliance guidelines going in here. You did briefly mention that there is eligibility for grants. I'd like to hear more on that, and just a point that, you do make about surrounding communities have many issues and are not compliant, and Lynn is. So it's good to hear that, and if you could just maybe give us a little more on the grants, what extent of the grants are, and what the city can do with them.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the city has been pretty successful in the last 5 years in seeking funding through the MassWorks program. And this is essentially the state's preeminent grant program to support infrastructure improvements within communities to support economic development. The city has received 4 grants in the last 5 years through the MassWorks program. Most recently is the Lower Washington Street Reconstruction Project that was recently finished, or almost recently finished. We will be kicking off and breaking ground on reconstruction of the intersection of Blossom Street and Linway. That was a MassWorks funded grant. to improve connections to the waterfront to downtown and improve access to the downtown from Linway. That's a MassWorks funded grant. There was a MassWorks grant that was used to improve signalization at Linway, where the breakwater housing development went. That was a MassWorks grant approved project. And then lastly, a lot of the infrastructure work that took place around the YMCA was also MassWorks funded. So there's several $1 million that the city has received through that program. And we will continue to be eligible for that funding by demonstrating compliance with these guidelines. The Housing Choice Grant Program is a more recent program through the state. It's sort of a two-step process. First, you have to show that you could be designated a housing choice community, and you essentially do that by showing that you're producing housing. Again, this is all around how this is more of a carrot that the state provided to communities to demonstrate that you have both created the zoning but also supporting the construction of new housing. So once you show and demonstrate and are designated a housing choice community, you are then eligible to go after capital grants up to $250,000 a year. The city hasn't received one yet, but we were just designated as a community last year. So this upcoming funding round, later this, I believe it's this fall, the city can go after funding through that grant program. And then lastly, the Gaming Commission grant funding. The city has been successful in getting funds through that as well. That has provided the money to do initial work around the Western Ave project, the roadway reconstruction project. And it's also, we received some funding to do a marketing program around the Arts and Cultural District downtown. So these are 3 grant programs that we're now currently eligible for and have been successful in. And by showing compliance with this program, we'll continue to have access to those dollars.
That's awesome. Thank you, Aaron. It's nice to see that, you're working with all of these different grant components and that the city's taken advantage of that, and we're benefiting by all of these improvements that you just listed. Thank you.
Councilor Phil.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Aaron, for the presentation. One quick question on your final statement was that we'll have to go forward with an amendment to meet their requirements. That's just our zoning. That's not a requirement by the developer. So any proposal that is for single bed, 1 bedroom, studio apartments, there's not a requirement on that developer to come up with a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom option as well, correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So I think there's an important distinction to make here, both with respect to that requirement, meaning it's just lifting a limitation on the ability to create units with 3 bedrooms or more, but it doesn't require that projects include a certain amount or a minimum amount of bedrooms, 3-bedroom units or more. The market will still dictate what gets built in that sense. And I think it's worth noting that of the several multifamily projects that have been built in the downtown recently, the market hasn't wanted to build 3-bedroom units. That limitation in the CBD, in the Central Business District, isn't what's driving that outcome. It's the market what's driving that. I think it's important to note. Same goes for the unit capacity. So I mentioned earlier that we'll have to demonstrate that the multifamily district or districts can accommodate up at least 7,200 units. That doesn't mean we have to build 7,200 units. That just means the regulations need to allow for that outcome. So there's a difference between kind of the market viability and the regulatory requirements that are built into it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Councilor Staben?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Aaron. Just getting back to what you had said about the Central Business District raising the cap to allow, to not cap the number of bedrooms. I kind of touched on the school crowding crisis a couple weeks back with the housing production plan update and the amount of students that we have enrolled in our schools. We're already at a much higher percentage rate per capita than anybody around us. We all know the condition of our schools, and we really can't accommodate the population that we currently have enrolled in them. If we were to raise that cap to allow a lot more bedrooms than what's currently allowed under the existing zoning, wouldn't that be an irresponsible move unless we have a concrete plan in place to build enough schools to properly house the kids that we currently have?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, the market is driving what's being built. And we haven't had a developer yet come in really proposing any units with 3 bedrooms or more. So I think the limitation is an unnecessary requirement in our zoning. And I think, really the bigger issue would be if we weren't compliant with these requirements, what we're walking away from in terms of grant funds to the city. MassWorks is in particular a very lucrative grant program for the city, and that would have meant if we weren't compliant going forward, that would mean that we're essentially foregoing millions of dollars of opportunity to improve our infrastructure.
But that infrastructure doesn't include new schools. And if we were to, say, raise that cap or remove that cap, and now we create a market for developers that want to come in and build buildings that have more than 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, that's going to further exacerbate the school issue because we'll be inviting it.
Yeah, I don't think changing the zoning is going to change the market conditions for that type of housing type. So I don't see that being a challenge for us going forward. But we can kind of work into that as we look at submitting our request for compliance to DHCD, and as we work through the possible zoning amendments, we can add flavor to that. But I don't see that becoming a problem in terms of the types of housing that's getting built.
But
The market's going to
that's
drive
nothing that the state looks at when mandating what cities and towns should do when changing their zonings, as far as the implications on other services in the community?
It doesn't.
Such as education? No?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Probably should. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I just want to thank Aaron for being here. Appreciate it. It's pretty technical, and there's a lot of things that we have questions about, and I'm sure we will the next time we meet. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Any other new business?
We have the ARPA presentation and update of survey.
So we have Nicole from Capital Strategic Solutions.
It's a tongue twister. CSS
Yeah.
is okay. Thank you for having me, Council President and council members. Would you like me to come up and?
If you would, come on up here. Yeah, great.
Wow, you're good.
We're impressed, are we?
Nobody gets that to happen.
Very impressed.
Nobody
want me
can
to come back
insert a
every
thumb
meeting if I
drive
can?
and make that happen.
It doesn't take much.
I think we have an IT job.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. This presentation is regarding the community outreach we've done in this first quarter for the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as the survey results. Oh, see, now I'm fired.
We spoke too soon.
Just want to change my slide.
Definitely the equipment.
Okay. Changed on my screen. Why did it change on yours?
That's a great first. Aaron needs to wink. He won't move if you wink.
Well, it's not a link because it's not connected to Wi-Fi. It's thinking. Computer is thinking it's running.
We'll apply for ARPA for technology.
You know, technology services, one of the areas I think
Yes.
that you can use the funding for. So let me just get into it. I know that you have the presentation in your packets. There were a couple of last minute edits to the presentation. So in the first quarter of 2022, we launched the ARPA.
Nicole, can you use the microphone so
Oh, I apologize.
listen, thank you.
Apologize. In the first quarter of 2022, we launched the lynnarpa.com website. With the assistance of the city administration and city departments, we developed a community database with approximately 509 community organization contacts. We've sent over 1,500 emails, as well as placed over 200 calls to community organizations. We've also held over 14 community forums, including ward meetings, attendance at school committee meetings, meetings with nonprofits and businesses, and canvassing your community, discussing what the American Rescue Plan Act is and what it means for the Lynn community. To date, we've received over 1,650 completed surveys. At each meeting, attendees heard a brief overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, how much the city received, the guidelines and the deadlines, as well as the city's community outreach and decision-making process. We engaged with community members, and through these conversations, they pointed out areas of focus that linked to the loss of revenue, including housing, access to mental health and substance abuse resources, employment issues, and childcare. Community members also highlighted the direct correlation between green space and mental health and the need to update existing parks and create more open space. Community members also identified recreation space, including a new turf field for sports activities and mitigation measures to improve water quality at Kings Beach, Sluice Pond, Flax Pond, and the Goldfish Pond Park. Several groups also discussed roadways, sidewalks, and the need for adequate street lighting. Community members talked about the necessity to preserve their neighborhoods, but also improve safety and accessibility and the aesthetic nature of their neighborhoods through increased street sweeping, trash removal, rodent remediation, and code enforcement. Other noteworthy topics in these discussions included the increase for funding for Lynn Public Schools, job training for all ages, community and senior centers, increasing the funding for nonprofits, as well as community events, the arts, and preserving historic city-owned buildings and facilities, and investing in technology for all. There were also many discussions around ensuring that the initiatives funded by the American Rescue Plan Act remain accessible and relevant for refugee and immigrant communities, and that the funding provided translation, and that the distribution of information be provided in accessible formats, not just through technology. One of the things we thought was important when we were discussing this information was to take a look at communities that receive similar amounts of ARPA funding from the federal government. In full disclosure, we're not working with the cities of Somerville or the city of Lowell. The city of Somerville has over 80,000 residents. They started their outreach in October of 2021, and they received $77.5 million in American Rescue Act funding. Somerville hosted a number of community forums and hosted an online survey yielding over 650 responses. The city of Lowell has over 111,000 residents. They received just over $76 million in ARPA funding. They too hosted a public meeting and obtained 108 survey responses to prioritize funding in their city. One community that's not listed on here and is not one of our clients either is the city of Worcester. Worcester received approximately double the funding that Lynn received, and they also have double the amount of residents. They received just about 300 surveys back.
How many again, Nicole? How many?
300. Just about 300. And I think they had about 200 community members attend their forums. Of the survey participants, 1,478 were Lynn residents. 92 were residents and business owners. 21 were business owners but non-residents. And 62 either didn't answer the question or responded none of the above. Did I break it? I don't want to have to buy it.
You jinxed it.
Calling IT again.
If you would like.
Take a break.
We'll take just a brief second. You have to close out the other one behind it.
No, I think the projector's just frozen right now. Did we have to switch computers? Because one was, Aaron was already working.
Wheel of death.
You want me to fix it?
Yes, please. I think your phone.
Was his fault?
Hey, you want to use this? It might help.
He has PowerPoint software on there. He's kidding.
I might be confused by the two of them, so why don't we close out the other one? Mm-hmm. Okay. Pull it back up. It's continually spilling, so it's thinking. Why don't we try closing it out and opening it back up? Yep.
Perfect. All right, there you go. Click play. Got it, Coco. I know.
Go to home and hit slideshow. Nope. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't go far.
So we'll go back to, actually, we'll just go forward to the next slide. .6% of survey respondents indicated that the pandemic had a negative impact on their household. When asked what type of assistance they needed, they identified food assistance, utilities, rent, direct cash, mental health services among the top priorities. When drilling down and going through the feedback in the short answer question, community members who highlighted individual assistance as a priority provided further feedback in identifying affordable housing, homelessness, recreation, elderly services, and tax relief, in which assistance is needed amongst several other suggestions. .81% of the business owners that completed the survey indicated that the pandemic had a negative impact on their business. Business owners that provided additional feedback through the short answer identified business educational programs, storefront improvements, and tax credits as areas for ARPA investment. $1,250 59 survey participants prioritized infrastructure improvements, with 39% of survey participants prioritizing roadways and sidewalks as top priorities for ARPA funding investment. Followed by Parks and Recreation with 1,019. School construction and upgrades with 941. Public health measures, 932. Individual assistance at 823. Small business assistance at 444. And digital equity for all at 277. Now, all these numbers add up to a number way higher than 1,653 of the survey participants. It's because they got to prioritize 5 areas of improvement. So they're selecting up to 5 categories. Survey participants also prioritize the subcategories for ARPA funding investment. I'm not going to go through all of these because you have them in your folders, but again, I'll just touch on a few of them. 39% chose roads and sidewalks, with 55% for existing upgrades to parks. The 941 for the prioritization of school construction and upgrades. There were no subcategories for that ARPA category. Then we had 49% that prioritized mental health in the public health measures. Of the survey participants that completed the section prioritizing individual assistance, 43.3% were looking for rental relief. For the small businesses, 64.9% for grants. And then there were 277 individuals that prioritized the digital equity for all. So of those 653 survey participants, 839 survey participants completed the short answer question, which fell within the ARPA categories. 275 identified multiple other areas for community investment, including Lynn Public Schools, citywide maintenance programs for clean streets, rodent remediation and trash removal, recreation, public safety measures, investment in city-owned facilities were amongst the top categories for other investment. So we've completed the first quarter of our outreach. We're now in the second quarter of outreach, and the ARPA project portal is live on the lynnarpa.com website. And we're asking community members, nonprofits, and our city departments to complete their ARPA project requests. The presentation of the results for the first quarter are right now. Here we are. Project workshops will happen in the month of May. So we'll assist community members and whoever needs help filling out those forms in those project workshops. The closure of the first phase of the project submittal request will happen on May 31st. That's what we're aiming for. That's not the one and only time people will be able to submit projects. This is a long, ongoing process, and there'll be multiple opportunities for project submittals. But we need to get moving. After that's complete, we'll launch another round of surveys asking people to prioritize the projects and getting feedback from community members. Then we'll come back here and meet with you all again, and we'll present the package to the City Council. And hopefully, in late summer, early fall, we'll be able to begin to implement some of those projects, you know, depending upon procurement and federal procurement laws. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions from the council? Councilor Arlington.
Thank you so much. I know my colleagues will have a lot of questions, but I have several, but I want you to answer me very briefly and just
Sure.
to the point. So I reviewed the slide presentations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. I like the comparison between Lynn and the other cities. And Councilor Lozzi and I were laughing knowing that the city of Lowell, which is bigger than ours, only have 108 respondents, where we have 1,600. So congratulations to you and your team. It's a fruit of your labor and hard work. But what are the margin of errors for this, the 1,600 respondents?
So as far as our calculations and the statistical
Right,
data?
because, people are probably using different computers, different gadgets.
I can't, I'm
Okay.
not the one that ran all the statistical data, but I can ask and then I can circle back with you about the margin
Yeah.
for error.
Please,
on
because
that.
that's important. Probably
I
somebody,
will
yeah,
definitely
somebody.
get back to you on that.
All right. The next slides, I'm very happy to see, on a personal note, that the top two results are infrastructure and parks, because we talked about this all the time. I'm just sharing that on a personal note. My other question is the launch of projects between mid-June 2022. Who are the participants of this survey selections?
The project selections?
Correct.
So what will happen is when someone submits a project, it'll be evaluated by a panel through the
So
administration.
just you and your team, basically.
Not necessarily my team. We're not evaluating the projects. We're going to funnel that to your city administration, and your departments will filter out those projects and do a little feasibility to what can and can't be accomplished. We'll run through the eligibility guidelines for ARPA and make sure that they match up with the funding opportunities, and then we'll come at you with the first round of projects based on that feedback.
Yeah. Last question. In your added slide, it's not in our packet, you mentioned about respondents who answered about the housing need, right? It's like
Yes.
90% there. How many people responded?
No,
to
that was 93 people.
93 people
Yes,
out of
90
1,600 people.
Yes.
All right, that's all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other comments? Council Lozey.
Yes, thank you for that. And survey is well done here. I do seem to see a lack of focus on sustainability projects or categories. And these type projects, I'm sure, can be included as subcategories within infrastructure or of the survey, which is a positive. And I just want to say that I know solar panels can be expensive and have been explored by this council in the past, but upfront costs were prohibitive at the time. With the ARPA funds now, this can pay the city back dividends with the solar energy. And I really hope that this is something that my colleagues will look at, and it's a great sustainability type project that will return on that initial investment.
So I can tell you that I personally read through all of those comments that came in the short answer form. I read through every single one of them. And there were 2 comments for solar arrays or green energy. I think 2, maybe 3, out of all of the comments and the feedback we received back from your residents. I do believe that there is opportunity here. Have someone submit a department or someone submit a project and set it up for review, because it could be tied to, an existing.
We've had these projects. There is a lot of data on it that we've looked at, having panels put on Lynn Tech's roofs, I think it was like 8 years ago. So it was explored, and there is some of that data. I think I may have it in the form of emails.
There's a lot of communities that do have solar arrays and are focusing on green energy initiatives and sustainable projects. So I don't think that the ARPA categories themselves should limit to what people are suggesting for projects, especially when it's something that is going to impact your generations to come, like solar panels on building, and reduce your overall energy cost. I would just encourage community members or departments to submit those.
Right, it's both an economic and an environmental
Exactly.
benefit. Pays back.
Council Lapia.
To that direct point, though, Nicole, I recall in one of the presentations, the reason why maybe it's prohibitive to match any federal grants. If we're going for federal solar energy
Right.
grants, we may not be able to tap into a bucket of APA.
No.
So that's prohibitive. So there are other resources out there to do the solar and green our schools or our city buildings, and it may not be the right usage because we don't want to be competing against ourselves
Exactly.
for federal dollars.
Exactly.
So I think we have to be careful on how we
But your
frame-
team,
frame.
I think I
Exactly,
missed
but-
you.
One moment.
No,
So I think your team, sorry to cut you off, Counselor, your team that's going to evaluate these projects may put those projects into a bucket for other funding. That's why I'm saying, don't eliminate what people are sending in, because we could put them aside.
Right.
And if there's another funding mechanism
Right.
for federal funding, because what we want to do, and what that team and your administration and yourselves want to do, and your whole city, we want to maximize these funds and get you, the most out of these ARPA funds, but also take advantage of what else is coming down the pipe. I mean, we've all seen Governor Baker releasing more and more funding as time goes on. It's related to ARPA and other pockets of money.
Council Lozey.
yeah, I'm not sure what Council Lapi is referring to, any other type of federal
So-
grants or funding for spending anywhere from $1 to $3 million on solar panels that could be placed on a school, which, as you pointed out, would return benefit because it would provide savings in hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual costs, not to mention the environmental
So the
impacts.
American Rescue Plan Act funding prohibits doing double federal matched funding. So if you already are
We
proceeding
have
down
none.
the.
There
but-
are none.
But if you're proceeding down the road with a project and you already have a pool of money that you're using federal funding for, you can't use ARPA money to supplement.
And don't, then just use
Right, I'm just-
solely ARPA.
I think they're just
Sorry.
making the comment that we can't,
Oh,
we
okay,
can't,
yeah.
yeah, I don't, I
But if
think,
there's
There
a
were
state
matching
matching,
fun-
if there's a state matching grant outside of ARPA, you can match it with ARPA
I
funding.
understand. Lynn is cash starved. We don't have the money. That's the answer we got when we explored solar panels 8 years ago. There just wasn't the money there. Even if somebody offered, and I know through the water and sewer, we had the wind turbine constructed with a grant of $600,000, which was wonderful, and they bonded the money. But the city just is cash starved. We can't afford to do something like that, even if we were to receive a grant. Whereas ARPA funding is ideal for this type of a proposal, a project. I think it's really a no-brainer. Thank you.
I don't think anyone's debating that part of it. I think we understand that, that's probably for another time, but what we're saying is you can't use any federally funded dollars to match grant.
I understand
Right,
that,
so,
Mr. President, yes.
all right. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Field.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor to work with Nicole and CSS as the council representative for the opera. I know the numbers are impressive of the outreach that we've done with many of my colleagues here on the city council hosting ward meetings. That certainly increased the number. All the outreach has been transparent. It's been inclusive. I think we knew ahead of this presentation, just from hearing personally, all of us, of what, folks wanted and were pushing for, and how we encouraged them to get on ARPA.com to sign up and to participate. I think maybe Mr. Fana or someone from the mayor's office could kind of give a better answer or a more declarative answer as far as Councilor Allenson's question about the panel and how that is going to move forward as being, again, transparent and inclusive when these projects are submitted. Is that something that you can answer?
John, if you want to come up to the podium, just give your name, let us know.
Absolutely. Jean-Michael Fana with the mayor's office. So currently, to speak to the process of how we are receiving these suggestions, they are coming in. CSS, as well as the mayor's office, is reviewing these. We have looked to also secure some additional consultants that are more are experts in more particular fields, such as infrastructure. So we're putting together that initial team. As for the exact group, I think that's still, we're still kind of finalizing that final process. But I expect that as we get projects throughout the month, we'll be reviewing them in tandem and with everyone and all the stakeholders, and also using those consultants to make sure that we can properly examine these projects, because we're expecting a lot of these are going to be suggestions from citizens who might not know the exact cost or scope of these projects, so we're going to utilize them for that as well.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Council Field?
and just, I don't want to speak on behalf of the mayor, but at one of the neighborhood meetings, he did say that this is a good guide to see what the requests are by the people that live and work in the city. And we're not going to be able to fund every single project that is listed here in the survey, but it certainly leads us to a good, guide for future projects after the funding from ARPA and the federal government is exhausted. We know just from doing this survey of what else we can move forward to with the requests of the constituents. Thank you, Nicole.
Any other question? Council Lapia?
I just have a point of information, too. I know it says the 75 million, but as you know, we did appropriate already 14 million for our schools for HVAC purposes, and then I believe another $3 million for small business grant relief to our businesses around Lynn. So is the number still around $58 million that we're looking to disperse?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
John, microphone, if you want to, you look like you wanted to say something, I apologize.
I actually think Mike Bertino might be the better person to answer this question, but I think there is some caveat with the 14 given to the schools, because I think some of that's actually coming back to the city, so it's more like 63, but we've been saying 50 plus.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right, any other questions or comments? I just have one. I think we should probably use some of the money to buy smart TVs here, so we're not having problems with the projectors all the time.
Second.
Which is kind of embarrassing, but I want to thank everyone helping to fix that. And I want to thank Nicole and her company. I think it's a daunting task to be able to collect all this data. There's so many moving parts to it, and I think we all have our work cut out ahead of us, even here at this council, to try to get this done. So appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
I'll try not to break your technology.
Future, I'm dealing with everybody and all the comments at the meetings and.
I love it.
All right. Any new business?
That's,
A motion to adjourn. We have a second. Second. All in favor? Aye.
So I would suggest to you that this 28 is a step toward